It's time to go ahead and move that down just a notch. It's time to go ahead and get started. Our Bible study period tonight. If you did not pick up a midweek newsletter, I encourage you to do that. There's not a whole lot new in this, though, that I can see. Ronnie Gerald, back pain still. I heard he was somewhat better. So that's good. Jonathan, what about your wife's dad? How did his surgery go? Good. Mark Maxwell's surgery went well. Keep Junior in your prayers. That's going to be a long road for him and his heart transplant. Keep Mike Bone in your prayers, and Kevin's dad, Charles, and the whole family, for that matter. Keep them in your prayers as well. Who else we got? Chris? Hunter. Some of you may know too. It, Jen, yeah, passed. There's another. Some of you remember Carla Bennett used to come here. Stacy passed away. Her husband, night before last. I don't know if some of you had two little girls. She came here. This was years ago, but it was unexpected. Fairly young man, maybe 50, maybe, but anyway, yeah. Bennett, Stacy Bennett, Carla Bennett was his wife, and she came here years ago. She had Allie and Anna, I believe, two daughters. But anyway, Rachel, my niece, and Carla were very close. So, but yeah, I think that was night before last. I don't know. I don't remember, Chris. I want to say Ligon and Bobo. I'll find out. But yeah, that was very unexpected. So remember that family. He was big in softball. I think he might have even been over the Lebanon High School softball girls booster. Stacy Bennett, Carla Bennett's husband, he passed away. Anybody else that? Okay. Mama's birthday's tomorrow. She'll be 92 tomorrow. She talked to Deb today, and bless her heart, Dad died. He was 94, almost 95. She's 92, and she told Deb today that she wished that her and Dad could have grown old together. They were literally married than most people live. So I guess it just depends on what your perspective is on on things. Anybody else? Jonathan's going to lead us in a song. Has anybody been picked to do the opening prayer? If not, I will be happy. I will be happy to pick someone, and I will pick Donnie.
So I was turning the computers and stuff on, and he's like, "You song leading?" I said, "I didn't think I was, but I can." And so there are no songs in there, so we're going to have to use these things called books. They should be located hopefully underneath the chair in front of you, maybe one that you're sitting on. And we're going to sing our opening song tonight. It's the first song that I opened up to, 8:55, and it's a good one, so we'll just do that. So I opened it and it fell on 8:55. We'll sing God's Family. We're part of a family that's been born again. Part of the family whose love knows no end. For Jesus has saved us and made us his own. Mark your invitation song. It'll be 384. 384 will be your invitation song.
Kind and merciful Father, we're thankful for this day, for all the blessings that you've given to us. Especially thankful for the privilege that we have of being your children, being able to talk to you and let you know what's on our hearts and our minds. Father, we have so many that of our number that are struggling at this time. We pray for those who have lost loved ones, some that were expected, some unexpected. Those who are suffering physically through various surgeries and illnesses, going through testing. Father, you know each and every situation, and we pray that you would be a comfort to them, that you be a very real presence in their lives and the lives of their families, that you be with the caregivers, those who are taking care of them. So grateful for all the talents and abilities that you bless mankind with. Father, we're thankful for the nation that we live in, the freedoms we enjoy. We know that we're living in a time with a lot of anger and distrust. And we just pray, Father, that you would help us to remember every day that we're a part of the kingdom of heaven. Our citizenship is there, it's not there here. We're grateful for our elected leaders. We pray that you would bless them. Help us keep our hearts and our minds focused on you. Father, we pray for those that are suffering throughout the world, especially in Ukraine. Father, pray that peace may come soon. Father, we're thankful that Jesus came and died for us. We're sorry that we created that situation, but that you had to send him as a remedy for our sins. We pray there anyone here that is not a child of yours, that they'll make that decision before it becomes everlasting and too late. We pray this in Jesus' name.
384 will be our song of invitation. 384. I forgot to mention too, Kevin had talked to Jennifer Elliott earlier today, and that Robert Glover had had some surgery done on his esophagus. I think he's been sick, so think a lot of Robert. We need to keep Robert in our prayers. Somebody snuck in behind me. Let's open up our Bibles to James just quickly, chapter 4. I said earlier, Mom's birthday is tomorrow. She'll be 92. Dad, as y'all know, he lived a long life too. And I'm sure when they were my age, they never thought they'd live that long. I just don't. How many of y'all now have maybe lived longer than you thought maybe you would have? I think back when I was, a teenager or 20 or 30 years old, you saw somebody that was 65 or 70 years old, and they're like, wow, boy, they old. They got, 1 foot, yeah, you're right, and they are. 1 foot in the grave, the other on a banana peel. So, but, Cindy kind of gets on to me because, I don't know, in the last year or so, and I've expressed this to y'all before, I guess I started thinking about it more with Dad's aging and passing, about just how short this life really is. It really is. And I know, for those of you that are, 20 or younger or even 30 or younger, y'all have already tuned me out because you're like, you're going to live forever. So I guess this is not for you. One day you'll see things differently. But there's a passage here. James early on in James chapter 3, he talks about showing our faith by our works. In fact, even goes so far as to say, I'll show you my faith by my works, and that faith without works is dead. Then I'm going to start. You can read along with me. This is verse 13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that, spend a year, carry on business, and make money. And that's what most of us do. Tomorrow we've already got our schedule lined up, and we've got to go to work, we've got to go to our jobs, we've got bills to pay. That's typical. And there's nothing wrong, in fact, everything right with working for a living and supporting your family. So that's not what he's saying here. What he's saying is about our mindset, our attitude, about where blessings come from and how mortal we really are. You don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You're but a mist that appears for a little while and vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast and brag. All such boasting is evil. Most of the times, if I've had a lesson, whether it be a sermon or a Bible study, I kind of left the thought right there and dwelt so much on the boasting and the bragging and the attitude. But he says something here that kind of connects back to what he says in James chapter 3. Anyone then who knows to do good or knows to do the good he ought to do and doesn't do it sins. The whole crux of what James is saying right here is we only have a very, very short period of time. In fact, that's where he started. Very, very short period of time. And we don't know how long our time is. Some of you may have many, many years left. Some of us maybe not. But the point he's trying to make here is, since you know that you only have such a short period of time, instead of getting so caught up in making money and doing business and this and that and planning this and that, he says, if you know there's good you ought to be doing and you don't do it, you're sinning. Every one of us are given opportunities during the course of the day to do good. I'm always, y'all know I'm a big fan of the old movies. I watch them all the time. There's a network now that I watch on MeTV, and all they show is old movies. But there's one that different catchphrases from different movies. I love on the Wizard of Oz when he's passing out all of the medals and stuff. He tells the one doctor, says, "Well, where I came from, there are men that all they do is go around and they do good deeds, and they are called good deed doers." And really and truly, that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be good deed doers. Do you think God gives us an opportunity every day to do good for somebody? Yeah, He does. I think your morning, however it starts tomorrow, look for opportunities to do good. Because when James says this here, I don't think we need to just take it out of hand and just kind of write it off. He says you're only given so many hours, so many minutes, Lee, and with whatever time you've got allowed for you, you need to be doing good, because he says you ought to do good. If you don't do good, when those opportunities present themselves, it's sin. In the morning, tomorrow, maybe this evening, those opportunities, do you think God gives you those opportunities? He goes so far in James chapter 3, he says, faith without works is dead. And that argument about, well, you can't work your way into heaven, and all that's true. But I will tell you this much. If you don't get anything else out of the book of James, know this. No, you won't be able to work your way into heaven. But faith without works is dead. And just like he said, you say you got faith, he says, I'll show you my faith by my works. You think God is watching? Maybe you're not saved. Maybe we won't dwell on that. But I know this, folks who are given opportunities to do good and know it and just let it pass by, God's watching. He's looking. And there's plenty of opportunities to do just that. I don't know where you are tonight. Maybe there's some things in your life that are amiss. Maybe there's some things in your life that, you need prayers about. It could be physical illness, spiritual or mental illness. You may have folks in your family that are hurting, that are suffering. Maybe you're having trouble at work. Maybe you're having trouble at home. I mean, let's face it, this life, wow, it's got a lot of stuff in it. But if you need to come forward and have your brothers and sisters pray for you, or maybe it has to do with gospel obedience, that's something else we can make new tonight too. If you need to come, Donna's going to lead us in our song. Stand and sing.
King of my life, I crown thee now. Thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy thorn-crowned brow, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even thy cup of grief to share. Thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. You are dismissed to your classes.
Mental health day. Take what you got. Well, everybody skip on over to 3rd John. Wow. Hey, the rankings are on Living Boro's website. They are on there? Okay. Yeah, Cindy read them to me before I left, and I forgot to write them down, so. I'm not be honest with you, I only met him a couple of times, but I knew Carl pretty well. Yeah, I knew her. Yeah. And as far as I know, I think, they don't know what Carl's death was, I think they find out. So, but he was a very young man, early 53. And then see, nothing. Hey, Lee, you got your microphone turned on? Problem, right? Maybe I went deaf. Thank you. Is it better? Better. Thanks. Yeah. The part of Earlene Jones will be played by Jerry tonight. Y'all, for those of you who weren't here, you remember. There's a lot of people here who didn't know Earlene. But anyway, Earlene used to sit right around that place back there, and she was a character. And more often than not, even if I had my microphone on, if she couldn't hear, I mean, just right in the middle of sometimes a sermon, I can't hear you. Yeah, no, Earlene, she had no trouble expressing herself. Oh, Earlene. She's just another one of the colorful people that we've lost here at Berea. All right, I'm going to If we finish tonight, fine. If we don't, I'm not going to worry about it. If you've got something to say, then just jump in there and say it. That's the kind of Bible class we want to have. I'm going to read along. This is John's third letter, kind of a general letter. This one, though, is written specifically to somebody. 2 John seemed like maybe. No, 3 John. We're in 3 John. Yeah, I'm just referencing back now, Jonathan. It seemed like maybe he was writing something to a specific congregation, maybe not. This one, for certain, though, is addressed to a specific person. And he addresses himself as the elder again. To my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health, and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. It gave me great joy to have some brothers come and tell me about your faithfulness to tell the truth and how you continue to walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Dear friend, he uses this term, dear friend, 4 different times, I think, in this passage. You are faithful in what you're doing for the brothers, even though they are strangers to you. They have told the church about your love. You do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. It was for the sake of the name that they went out, receiving no help from the pagans. We ought therefore to show hospitality to such men, so that we may work together for the truth. We're going to come back to that hospitality thing in just a minute. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, your version may say preeminence. I think that's the old King James, desires the preeminence, will have nothing to do with us. You imagine, I'm going to stop here just a moment. Do you think Diotrephes knew that John was an apostle? How could he not have known that John was an apostle? And yet, when John mentions that he would have nothing to do with us, John's including himself in that number too. This guy, wow. We'll talk about the difference between Gaius and Diotrephes here. And there's something else I want to read here too that I find is striking. So if I come, I will call attention to what he's doing, gossiping maliciously about us. Again, he's talking about John and the other brethren. Not satisfied with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers. He also stops those who wants to do so and puts them out of the church. How does one man gain that kind of power? Evidently he had it. He was doing it. Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. This is what he said in John 2. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet the friends there by name. Let's back up just a little bit. He uses the term dear friend. I count 4 different times. Friends, if you count that, maybe 5 times. Who did John count as his friends? Yeah, Gaius he calls out specifically, but then he talks about the friends send their greetings to you and vice versa, you send them back. So in John's mind, and in fact in our mind too, who should be your closest friends? Yeah, why? And some of these things sound elementary, but let's face it, why? It's important in the first century. Yeah, the old birds of a feather flock together thing. We need to associate with people of like faith. It's difficult. How many of you have close friends at work, where you work, or have had? Maybe close friends at work that were not members of the Lord's church. There's nothing wrong with that either. But our closest friends and our closest companions, as far as keeping us in the faith, we need to be very careful. We quote evil companionship, corrupt good morals or good manners a lot, and try to use that on our children about who they choose as friends at school or sports or whatever, and that's important. But it's not just important for children. It's important for everybody. You need to make sure that the companionship you choose is not somebody that's going to pull you away from God. And again, it's tough to do. I can think of folks that I spent, 8, 9 hours, sometimes more than that a day, at least 5, sometimes 6 days a week at work. You do that, and these aren't, I'm talking about, they're not bad people, they're not evil people. But if you spend just by simple exposure to someone who maybe, would give you the shirt off their back, but as far as their other moral beliefs, maybe not so great, that has an effect over a period of time. So it's important to try to fortify our Christian faith with other people that believe like we do. Which brings me to this, and I won't dwell on it forever, then we'll go on. How often do we get an opportunity to do that, formally speaking, to be around people of like faith? Sunday, Wednesday, any other time? The point I'm going to say this, and then you can, food for thought, you can mull this over if you want to. I'm not putting this in a laboratory experiment, but it's just common sense. If you are around folks that don't believe as you do, faith-wise, Christian-wise, for 40, 50, or 60 hours a week, and you're around folks that do 3 hours a week, which has the most influence? By and large, for the most part. I mean, there are some things that you can do with your family and study at home, but it would be pretty safe to say that if there's not some kind of counter to that influence that you are exposed to every day at school and work, whatever, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to slip. You're going to fall away. Now, there are some exceptions to that, I suppose, but the rule of thumb would be whoever you're around the most, you're going to tend to take on those qualities. So it's important. Study, of course, having a home life that's, everybody wants their children and their family to go to heaven. That's our first and foremost, priority, our biological families. But it's important for us, are the friends we pick. John makes it pretty plain right here. It also, too, he talks about Gaius. He goes so far to say, hey, I've heard some good things about you. I've heard you're seeing some brethren that you don't even know. You're coming in there. They're out of town. They're strangers. But you're taking them in and making them feel welcome. You're showing them some hospitality. Do you think we brag on each other enough in the church when we see somebody doing good? Is there anything wrong with that? No, there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes folks take on this attitude, well, I don't want to take all my compliments here. I'm going to lay up treasure in heaven, and listen, y'all. Don't take that so far. That's never what that was intended to mean. If you've got somebody and they're doing a good work here, and maybe for you, or you just heard about it out in the community, just through the grapevine or whatever, tell them about it. Tell them. It's just, we wait till somebody dies, and then we get up there in the funeral home, and talk about them, and they never heard any of that when they were alive. So Paul had no problem bragging about folks that are doing good. He makes sure to tell Gaius that, hey, I appreciate what you've been doing. The hospitality factor, too. Today it's a little bit different in the environment we live in, but we can't lose this thought. Showing hospitality or being given to hospitality is not just for elders, it's for everybody. Making sure somebody, how many maybe had to travel a lot? I know Donnie had a lot, travel around for your jobs. How many, when you go somewhere, whether it's work-related or vacation-related, try to find a Lord's body to worship with? You learn a lot. I have, the summer we spent, 3.5, 4 months in New York for a while. We found a congregation of God's people up there, and they're rare. They're rare in New York. They thought they were a big congregation. They had like 55 one Sunday, and they're like, woo, got 55 people. But having said that, having a place where the saints were, that you knew you could go, even being out of town or sometimes even out of the country, it's big for people to try to make you feel welcome. You have something in common. You don't have to be as concerned about somebody who's just thrown out into a city somewhere that really don't know anybody. You've got a place to go to. We need to take advantage of that. We have folks that have visited here before that have been displaced, or they're just passing through, or they're looking maybe they've just moved into a new neighborhood or whatever, to make sure that they're made to feel welcome. He brags on him for being hospitable after calling him dear friend. Let's see here. Now, let me skip on over where I want to get. He brags on Gaius. Gaius obviously was to be bragged on. But now, in verse 9, I wrote to the church. Now, we're going to look at this very carefully. First thing he says here, I wrote to the church. Now, does that mean there's another letter other than this one? I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will have nothing to do with us. Is it possible John wrote a letter that Diotrephes held out on? Oh, I think it's more than possible. I think that's exactly what he did, and it's one of the reasons he says, I'm going to come see him. We know that there's 1st and 2nd John. We've looked at those, but John goes so far to say here, and I don't know the order and how this third letter gets to him, but John makes it pretty plain. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will have nothing to do with us. And again, I ask, who is us? The church. John, included in that number, John, as he identifies himself as the elder, but Diotrephes is like, no, why in the world? And I get back to what I said before. Is there any way that Diotrephes would not have known that John was an apostle? No, it's impossible. So Diotrephes knew that John was an apostle now. The last one left. And what did that faze him as far as keeping information from the congregation there that John the apostle wrote? Didn't faze him. He was okay with that. In fact, he said he just flat out didn't want the letter in. I don't know what the contents of the letter were. I have no idea. But it doesn't make any difference. And he said the reason he did it because he loved to be first. Pride, and we've talked about this. I won't dwell on it long. What caused the devil to fall? You said it had to come up with one word. It's pride. That's it. Pride's a serious matter. Always has been. Always has been. Solomon addresses it over and over again in some of his writings. Jesus addresses it. Pride is a serious matter. Diotrephes, he loved to be first. In the Old King James, he desired the preeminence. He wanted even over John. Let me ask you this. Do you think Diotrephes would have had any problem practicing that same thing or acting that same way even with Jesus? I don't think so. Were there not Jews in Jesus' day who did the same thing? Yeah, they did. And again, the most stark example of that would be after Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, their solution was to kill Jesus and kill Lazarus. So when somebody finally gets it in their head that they are this bad and they want to be on top that bad, is there anything that they would not do to hold on to that? No. Money drives a lot of people to do a lot of things that are wrong, roots of all evil or all kinds of evil. Sexual immorality, there are people that are driven by that. But power and the lust for that and the pride of life and wanting to be first is super, super, super dangerous in the world and in the church. Down through history, empires marching past. They come and they go. That's just the way things are. But in the Lord's church, there's no place for that. He says he will have nothing to do with us. So, he says, if I come, this sounds like something Paul would write. So if I come, I will call attention to what he is doing. And this is crazy. Gossiping maliciously about us. This guy was actually gossiping about John and other Christians in another church. Maliciously. I have no idea what he was saying. Whatever it was must have been pretty rotten. But you think about the church and what it stands for. John, the last apostle here, what could he have possibly been saying maliciously about the church? Now, we do know this. Earlier on, what's one of the issues that John addresses? If people say that Christ has not come in the flesh, they are the what? Antichrist. I don't know if that's part of what he was saying or not. I don't know. I have no idea. But whatever it was a malicious thing to try to tear down the Lord's church. Not just John personally, but the Lord's church. Let me tell y'all something. Boy, there are a lot of sins that I guess we could grade out from bad to worse. But you do not want to be called in the category of speaking maliciously or gossiping about the Lord's church, the bride. If you are talking about here's the rub here. What's the Lord's church made of? People. So most likely he was maliciously speaking about faithful members of the Lord's church. And could have been lies. He said he was gossiping too, maliciously about us, gossiping maliciously about us. It's just a serious, serious crime against the church. And John says, if I come, I'm going to call attention to what he's doing. John definitely has the power to do so. Not satisfied with that. In other words, the talking about it and the gossip, that wasn't good enough for this guy. Not satisfied with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers. What did he brag on Gaius about? That he did. He did. And he showed them hospitality. These people back during this period of time, y'all, it was if you were traveling around, and I think it's more than inferred here, who John's talking about, to Gaius. These people that Gaius was bringing in, they were going out and they were preaching the gospel. These were evangelists. These were folks that were moving from town to town, and they had no place to stay, and much less a place to eat. They couldn't go down to the Hampton or whatever, or the Days Inn. That didn't exist. So what Gaius was doing was benefiting the Lord's church in this. It was allowing these men to go and preach the gospel where if they didn't have a place to stay, they would have just had to stay at home. There wasn't any place, or sleep on the side of the road. But this guy, he didn't even do that. He was trying to suppress that. Not satisfied, he refuses to welcome the brother. He also, this is crazy. Not only was he not going to do it, but the ones that were willing to do so, he made them stop too. So, again, how power hungry is this guy? Not only am I not going to do it, but I don't want you to do it either. He also stopped those, and then he puts them out of the church. Wow. How do you think he got that kind of power? And apparently he had it. He had it. John says so. How did he get that kind of power? James said he took it. You got that kind of power, you take it. And people allowed it to happen. I don't know. John doesn't mention any kind of eldership here. He doesn't mention if Diotrephes was an elder. It's possible. It's very possible. Somehow or another he'd managed to rise to a position of power that when he told people to do this, they did it. And even the ones that were trying to house some of these traveling evangelists, he told them, if you don't put them out, I'm gonna kick you out of the church. Yeah, Weldon.
I think it's very common, and I've been in a situation where it was. When I began working with the congregation, 3 elders, and one of them said to the other elder, "You better be really nice to him." And I said, "Well, I try to treat everyone. No, but you better be really nice to him." Just emphasize it, and I was.
Yeah.
And I resigned. I mean, it was my choice. But he has caused every division at other churches
Yeah.
in that area. And the reason he had a strong personality, didn't edit himself a bit. He was tall and overbearing and surrounded by cowards. All it took 2 or 3 men to stand up and say, "That's it. We're not going to have any more of this."
And most of the time, that's all it does take. I know of a man that he has since passed, but here in Wilson County, who wasn't satisfied after he would divide one church, and him and his whole family, they just moved from church to church and sow the same seeds of discord in each church. And I saw that with my own eyes. Didn't stay necessarily at one church and cause discord, but wasn't satisfied with that. They just move around. And some of the same things would come up. And I think what a lot of times that people do, especially elders and and good people, members of the Lord's church, they feel like it's being Christian to try to placate somebody like that and minimize the conflict, and that's the worst possible thing you can do. You cannot placate a bully. I don't care if he thinks he's doing God's work or not. It just can't be done. Yeah, Will.
He was so bad. Steve Gibson, the late Steve Gibson here who lived in Nashville, knew about him and never set foot in California. That's
Really?
how bad this guy was.
Really?
Well, I know who you're talking about. But, you know, you're right. What strikes me is when someone does that, you have two kind of people that tend to get in positions like that. One has a lot of authority on the job, and he just has a little trouble editing himself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very sincere thing. And the other guy has never been seen by any employer as worth 1 ounce of authority. And now he's got
Now he's got it.
And that's the worst situation, you know. I mean, it's one thing, I've known preachers who've been kind of ordered around by a guy who used to ordering around 30 people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they just brush it off, you know, that's just something he's in the habit of doing. But this is very malicious, you know, and these guys, and when somebody's power hungry, there's nothing like it.
No.
I think it overrides greed, anything, you just can't stop somebody who's power hungry.
Well, and I've seen people actually take a position in management to have the power and make less money.
I'm sorry, right?
I've seen, and some of y'all may have seen this too. I know of a guy in particular, he took a position so he could tell people what to do and took a cut in pay to do it. To make less, he took less money just so he could tell people what to do. Yes, sir. Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. I agree. Somebody said something over here. I thought somebody said something over here earlier. The Diotrephes effect is it's alive and well everywhere in the world. Always has been, but in the Lord's church, it's particularly dangerous because in the Lord's church we're kind of conditioned to we don't want to have a lot of trouble and we don't want to have a big fuss or muss and brother so and so that's just the way he is. But I got to tell y'all, you let somebody like that with that kind of personality get in any kind of position of power, whether it's in the pulpit or the eldership or a deacon or whatever, you got serious trouble on your hands because that kind of personality just doesn't lend itself. Because here's the deal, y'all. This is how the church is so different from any other organization, whether it's the workplace or, I don't know, the military or whatever else. Who's our head? Jesus Christ is. Anybody else? No. And each congregation has its own eldership. So the very structure of the church does not lend itself to a personality like this. This kind of personality cannot be in the Lord's church in any kind of position of power at all, because that's just not how the Lord's church is structured. Yeah, Donnie?
Do you think maybe he was charismatic, very good speaker?
Could have been.
Maybe he said what people wanted to hear?
Possibly. That's been done down throughout the ages as well. And here's something else people are good at. The malicious part and the things that John was hearing over here, well, that might not have been what Diotrephes was saying at home. Diotrephes might have been saying, John, that bunch over there, I'm just trying to keep peace here at our congregation. And also being able to tell people what they want to hear, how they want to hear it. Some people just have a knack for that. Good speakers maybe started out that way. So this is something else that happens to a lot of folks too. Once you get caught up in something, whether you're caught up in Diotrephes' personality, whatever, once you buy into it, sometimes it's hard to get out of it. It's tough. Once you buy into something and you've kind of put your stamp of approval on it too, think about this for a minute. And it's just human nature. What was Paul really one of the things he was really upset with the Corinthians about? What were they bragging about, some of them? Yeah, who had baptized them? I mean, they were already trying to set up like a hierarchy of, well, I was baptized by, Peter. Why did you think they did that? Was any of them's baptism more important than the other? So, status. Yeah, that's what it does. So, people like Diotrephes, they dwell on that, and they also know how to play to people's weakness about that. To brag, to boast about themselves too. The power-hungry folks have always been around. But in the Lord's church, it's especially dangerous. And our elders have to have a look at. How about this? There's a classic. Let me throw this out here. And I'm not saying this is definitely not Berea, but I'm throwing this out there. There was a place that I am familiar with. This was, I don't know, 35, 40 years ago. And they had an elder that was, I'm not going to say this bad, but was involved in some things that were pretty bad. How do you get rid of an elder? I'm just throwing this out there. How do you get rid of an elder? Somebody that's sitting in the office, say there's 3 or 4 other elders, how do you get rid of him? Vote of no confidence? Well, unless they kill the church first. See, here's the deal. We're left. There's a lot of things we're not told. We're told about disfellowship in any Christian, and that same thing would apply to an elder. But what if it's not something sexual immorality? What if it's just little shades and inklings of maybe a little case of Diotrephes here and wanting to rule the roost, but you can't quite put your thumb on it? What do you do? First. So somebody has to be the first one to initiate that. Does it necessarily have to be an elder to do that? See, here's the deal, because if that's the case, if the elders aren't willing to do it, then somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. And that's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. But here's the point I'm trying to make, y'all. If those kind of things go unchecked, you end up with this. This was in the 1st century. John was still alive. And this guy was pulling this kind of stunt. So don't think it don't happen now, because it's like Wells said, oh yes, it does. And here's something I said 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is true, y'all. Don't buy into this if there's a matter that comes up that's some kind of conflict or difference of opinion, that, well, there's 2 sides to every story. I said this and we'll keep saying it. Maybe not. But here's the deal. That doesn't mean that one side's right. I mean, there's an equal amount of rightness and wrongness to both sides. There are times in the Lord's church where one side is completely wrong, totally wrong. And there is no compromise with that. If you start buying into that, well, yeah, but there will be times. Have there not been times in your life where you have been an issue with somebody and the other person was completely wrong and you hadn't? Because I have. Now, there have been times where it was plenty of guilt to go around and I take my blame for it. But there will be situations like Diotrephes here. I don't see John, I don't know that he ever made the trip. But I don't see John coming in there and saying, Diotrephes, we need to talk about something. It may be just me, but I don't see that. I see John coming in there like Paul would and said, you, this is what you're doing. And you're going to cease right now or it's going to get ugly. That's what I see. I think John, he was the disciple that Jesus loved, but I don't think he'd have pulled any punches with him. So sometimes in the Lord's church, that's what has to be done. I'm sorry, Donnie, did you have...
Well, anytime that you have division, everybody bears some responsibility. Either you sat quietly by and let things get out of hand, or you were the one who was causing
Right.
the stuff out. So I think every case that I know of where there's been division within the congregation, that's been the case every single time.
Yeah, and it's not just the church. Isn't that the way it is with everything? Workplace, ball team, politics. You sit back long enough and you just let it go. But here's the thing with it's just human nature too. Which is easier to do? Sometimes it's easier just to let it go. I've had troubled employees before at work, and I learned early on, unfortunately in a couple of cases too late, that you're not doing yourself a favor by trying to placate or stroke somebody. The best thing to do is just go ahead and just cut it loose. You get 3 strikes or whatever and you're out. But there are people on this planet, y'all, and all they're here for is to just use you up and throw you away. I'm sorry if that sounds unchristian, but if you haven't met one of those people yet, then you have led a charmed existence. That's what they're here for. That's what they do. It's kind of like Tucker asked me the other day, why did God make ticks? I don't know. I guess they serve a purpose, maybe. But the fact of the matter is, there are some folks, they ain't going to get it. I'm sorry, Weldon.
An older preacher taught one time that the elders that step down are qualified. You know, but
I've heard that, yeah.
I've known elders that were maybe confronted by the fact that I'm thinking of one that was confronted by a deacon and somebody in a medical field, and he was told he was over medicated, he was saying some things he shouldn't be saying.
Mm-hmm.
He stepped down. I mean, more often
Yeah.
than not, I've seen that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I don't.
Me, you know.
Most of the time, elderships, at least around here, by and large, that everybody has their faults, and ministers. But for the most part, there's an adherence. Most people want to do, members of the Lord Church want to do what we're told to do as far as church order and organization is done. But then, then there's that example that'll always pop up, somebody who's wanting to push the limits and try to, desire the preeminence. Let me go a little bit further. Yeah, I'm sorry. Further.
Another thought here too. This shines a light on how the wisdom is divine. Each congregation is autonomous. Now, if you get one bad apple and get 3 or 4 congregations, well, I'm going to take this one, no, I'm going to take this. No, God in His wisdom said, hey, each congregation stands alone.
Yeah.
They're going to take care of their own business. They're going to follow much of it.
Yeah, John said in the letter that we read last week that he was glad to hear that some of you are doing well. Well, it's inferred some were not doing well. And this is a whole other lesson, but along what you just said, if you go to, but I think it proves the point, the letters that are written to the 7 churches in Asia, there were different cities mentioned. Now, first century pattern would suggest that within each city there would be home congregations of people. The letter was written to the city. And the reason I'm saying that, it would be impossible for a letter to be written to a congregation and say, you have people there that are basically practicing prostitution, pagan idolatry prostitution in your church, and it still be a church. More likely, in some of the cases that are on those 7 churches, there would have been some of the home congregations that would have been contaminated with that false doctrine, but some were not. So if the church, there's a letter written to, this is just me, I would think that if those letters were written to the church today, there would be a letter written to Lebanon. Not Berea, Lebanon. And because that would leave open, because if there were places in Lebanon, the church in general, that had fallen or were about to have their candlestick removed, then there were other congregations that were not. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't see any other way some of the things that are mentioned in those letters could have been possible. Do you think we could allow that to be going on here in whatever the Nicolaitans and all the stuff they did, you were allowed to go on and not have your candlestick removed? So back to what you were saying, the contamination, the way God organized things, whether it's city to city or congregation to congregation. Our elders here, here's something else too, they're over us. Our elders here, they're not over the saints that meet down the road at Highland Heights or Maple Hill. That's not that's not who they answer for. Can we or should we be concerned for the church as a whole? Well, sure we should. But do we take direct involvement in their affairs and try to police them? No. First of all, we have enough trouble of our own. Secondly, you don't even know, and what's the only way you would have even known about a problem? It would have been through secondhand information. You don't even know what's going on there. And it's kind of like what me and Weldon have talked about before. There are and have been members of the Brotherhood in times past who think they're God's self-appointed policemen. And they're going to travel around, they're going to go congregation to congregation, and they're going to write little publications and pamphlets and going to tell on what they heard brother and sister so-and-so said about this congregation over here. There are elders and deacons and ministers and all different kinds of jobs and offices mentioned in the New Testament. There is not a police force. God does not have a police force. You just don't. You're not God's policeman. Take care of your family. Worship under the oversight and elders here at Berea. But you're not. God doesn't have a police force. Yeah, Jason.
When me and Tim were elders, just us two, we had a lady that was attending here periodically. She asked for a meeting with us, and we met with her. She asked for us to write a letter to the other elders to a former church that she was at, telling them that they were doing this and that wrong. And I just politely told her, ma'am, I find no scriptural basis for me to ever do that. And, you know, and she left a little upset, because we wouldn't do it. I just, I did not see any way that that was scripturally based and sound, even if what she was saying was correct.
Right.
And they were outside the word in what they were doing. There's just, I didn't find it. I mean, I
No.
searched and I couldn't
No.
find any authority.
I got to tell you, the folks that appoint themselves to do that kind of work, this has just been my experience. They are some of the worst Diotrephes around. They really are. They feel like they have a God-appointed duty to go around and correct everybody else, and no, they don't. They don't have that. We have enough trouble of our own. There's no problem. You know, Paul, he confronted Peter to his face if somebody's doing something wrong. That's fine. But we're talking about congregation to congregation and really going against God's order of the church. Jesus Christ is the head, each autonomous congregation with its eldership, separate and apart. We should all be teaching the same thing because we have this to go back to, and Jesus Christ is the head. But I've seen a lot of division, a lot of conflict stirred up by so-called Christian publications. I used to get several of those. I don't get any anymore. I just don't. For different reasons, I just can't, because a lot of them had drifted so far to one side that I felt like some of it was unreliable. There was always some good articles in it. And then there were some others that it seemed like the whole publication had just started drifting toward trying to find fault and slamming or trying to tell on somebody else. I don't need that. I don't need it. So it's sad that it's come to that. But anybody have anything else you want to throw out there? All right. Well, would you bow with me? Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the day you've given us, the time you've given us to spend in your word. As we leave this place, dear Lord, we pray that we can be the people you would have to be, not please ourselves. Be with us as we return on the Lord's day. Pray that you will keep us safe, heal those that we've mentioned in our prayers and their families, give them peace and comfort. Those that have lost the people that they love, that maybe one day they can be reunited. Thank you for Jesus who died for us, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.